Have you ever felt completely certain about something, only to later discover you were completely wrong? Or perhaps you've watched someone speak with total confidence about a subject they clearly knew very little about. This tension between what we think we know and what we actually know is at the heart of one of the most intriguing psychological and philosophical patterns in human behavior, the Dunning-Kruger effect. But this isn't just about modern psychology. The illusion of knowledge, the fear of awakening, and the pain of confronting truth have haunted thinkers for millennia. Today, we're going to dive deep into this illusion, from the shadows of Plato's cave, through the raw freedom of existentialism, to the radical honesty of Nietzsche. This is a journey through ignorance, self-deception, and ultimately, liberation. In 1999, two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, conducted a series of experiments that revealed something peculiar. People with lower ability in a given task often overestimated their competence. Meanwhile, those with higher ability tended to underestimate theirs. This cognitive bias became known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. In essence, the less we know, the more confident we tend to be. It's not just a flaw in others. It's a trap we all fall into. Because in order to know how much we don't know, we first have to have enough knowledge to even see the gap. And here's the kicker. The people most confident in their ideas might be the ones least qualified to hold them. This isn't just about trivia quizzes or job interviews. It shapes our politics, our education systems, and even our personal relationships. Confidence becomes a mask, and sometimes that mask becomes the face. Long before psychologists gave names to cognitive biases, the Greek philosopher Plato described something eerily similar in his allegory of the cave. Imagine people living their entire lives chained inside a dark cave, their heads fixed, they can only stare at the wall in front of them. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and their backs, others carry objects, casting shadows onto the cave wall. These prisoners believe the shadows are reality. They name them. They argue about them. They build entire worldviews based on them. Why? Because it's all they've ever known. But what happens when one prisoner escapes? At first, the light blinds him. He resists. The truth is painful, but slowly his eyes adjust. He sees the fire, the puppets. Eventually, he emerges into the world outside the cave and sees the sun, the real world. And here's the tragedy. When he returns to tell the others, they reject him. They ridicule him. Some interpretations even say they'd kill him. Why? Because truth threatens comfort. Certainty, even if false, is easier than doubt. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the modern echo of this ancient parable. We don't just fail to see our ignorance, we defend it. We become attached to the shadows because stepping into the light would force us to admit we were wrong. It's not just a psychological limitation, it's a philosophical dilemma. So if escaping the cave means gaining awareness, what does that mean for how we live? This is where existentialist thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus enter the picture. They weren't interested in abstract knowledge for its own sake. They cared about what it feels like to confront truth, to realize we are free and alone. For Sartre, freedom was a curse as much as a blessing. He famously wrote that we are condemned to be free. Once we know the shadows are not reality, we can't go back. But that freedom also leaves us without a script. There's no cosmic guidebook, no divine blueprint. Just us, raw and exposed, in a world without inherent meaning, unless we create it ourselves. Camus called this the absurd, the tension between our desperate desire for meaning and the universe's silence. And yet, he urged us not to despair, but to rebel, to live with passion despite the absurd. The existentialists, like the escaped prisoner, stand outside the cave and shout, "Look, there's more!" But it comes at a cost, anxiety, doubt, the weight of responsibility. We are not only capable of choosing, we are obligated to. And for many, that burden is heavier than the chains. If Plato gave us the cave, and existentialism gave us the weight of freedom, Friedrich Nietzsche kicked open the cave's walls and asked, "Now what?" Nietzsche was a thinker who refused comfort. He didn't just want to escape illusions, he wanted to tear them down. To him, society was full of caves, religion, morality, herd thinking, systems designed to make us feel safe rather than face the terrifying truth of our potential. He famously proclaimed, "God is dead." But this wasn't celebration. It was warning. Without a divine order, we lose our compass. The old shadows no longer guide us. And in that vacuum, we either become lost or we evolve. That evolution for Nietzsche meant becoming the Übermensch, the overman. Not a superior being in the physical sense, but a person who creates their own values, who writes their own meaning, who walks alone if they must. The overman doesn't fear the uncertainty of freedom. They embrace it. They understand that truth isn't found in inherited beliefs or consensus reality, but in self-overcoming, in striving, in becoming. But here's the twist. Becoming the overman is rare. Most people, Nietzsche thought, would rather stay in the cave. They would rather follow the crowd, live within comfortable lies, and mock those who dare to break free. And so we return to Dunning and Kruger, not as isolated psychologists, but as echoes of Plato, Sartre, and Nietzsche. The illusion of knowledge, the fear of truth, the courage to look inward and say, "I do not know, but I will learn." That is the real journey. So, what do we do with all this? We live in an age of endless opinions. Social media, algorithms, influencers. We're surrounded by shadows, confident voices, and shallow certainty. But maybe the first step is not to speak louder, but to listen more carefully. To ask, like Socrates did, "What do I really know?" To look around and ask, "Am I still in the cave? And if so, am I willing to leave it?" Knowledge isn't just about facts, it's about humility. Philosophy isn't just about abstract thought, it's about how we live. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, maybe you've already taken the first step. Not to be certain, but to be curious. We've all been there, whether it's learning a new skill, diving into a complex subject, or simply engaging in a debate. There's that moment when, after just enough knowledge, we think we know it all. But the deeper we go, the more we realize how much we didn't understand. The Dunning-Kruger effect explains this paradox. People with limited knowledge tend to overestimate their ability, while those who have more expertise often underestimate their competence. This phenomenon occurs because, with limited knowledge, people don't have enough insight to recognize their own lack of understanding. It's a cognitive bias where the less you know, the more likely you are to believe you know everything. At its core, the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just a quirky anomaly in human behavior. It's a reflection of how our minds navigate the complex world of knowledge. When we're faced with a vast sea of information, it's easy to mistake the little island we've discovered for the entire world. But is this just about intellectual misjudgment? Or could it be something deeper, something about how we construct our sense of self in a world brimming with uncertainty? This brings us to the famous metaphor of Plato's cave. In his work, The Republic, Plato describes a group of prisoners who have been chained in a cave for their entire lives. They can only see shadows projected on the wall in front of them, created by objects behind them. To the prisoners, these shadows are their reality. They believe them to be the only truth because it's all they've ever known. In this allegory, Plato suggests that most of us live in a similar state of ignorance, seeing only the shadows of reality, false perceptions, limited truths, illusions. We, like the prisoners, accept these shadows as the truth, not realizing there's a whole world outside of our limited view. But Plato doesn't stop there. He introduces the idea of the philosopher, the one who dares to leave the cave. This person steps out into the blinding light of the sun, into the painful truth of reality. Initially, it's overwhelming and uncomfortable, but eventually, they come to understand the true forms of things, the essence behind the mere shadows. Isn't this just what the Dunning-Kruger effect illustrates? We are all prisoners to our limited understanding. And like those prisoners, we sometimes overestimate the extent of our knowledge. Plato's allegory shows us that breaking free from our limited understanding is not just about gaining more knowledge. It's about seeing the world for what it truly is, even when it's uncomfortable or painful. What would it take to break free of the cave? To acknowledge that what we thought we knew was merely a shadow? The journey out of the cave isn't just a philosophical thought experiment. It's a struggle for authenticity, freedom, and self-definition. This brings us to existentialism, a philosophical movement that tackles the reality of human freedom and responsibility. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free. What does that mean? In simple terms, it means we are thrown into a world without preordained meaning, and it's up to us to create our own. There's no higher authority, no cosmic guide, only the harsh reality of our own choices. When we step outside the cave, we confront the terrifying freedom that Sartre speaks of. We are not just discovering facts about the world. We are faced with the task of creating meaning in a world that may seem indifferent, even hostile. To exist is to choose, and to choose is to be free. But here's the challenge. The more we come to realize the vastness of our freedom, the more we face the weight of responsibility. Existentialism pushes us to question everything. The Dunning-Kruger effect highlights how easy it is to settle into certainty. But existentialism demands that we continuously question, explore, and redefine our beliefs and values. It's the paradox of freedom. The more we know, the more we realize how much we don't know. The existentialist embraces this uncertainty, choosing to live authentically rather than relying on comforting illusions. If Plato gave us the cave and existentialism gave us the weight of freedom, Friedrich Nietzsche kicked open the cave's walls and asked, "Now what?" Nietzsche was a thinker who refused comfort. He didn't just want to escape illusions, he wanted to tear them down. To him, society was full of caves, religion, morality, herd thinking, systems designed to make us feel safe rather than face the terrifying truth of our potential. He famously proclaimed, "God is dead." But this wasn't celebration, it was warning. Without a divine order, we lose our compass. The old shadows no longer guide us. And in that vacuum, we either become lost or we evolve. That evolution for Nietzsche meant becoming the Übermensch, the overman. Not a superior being in the physical sense, but a person who creates their own values, who writes their own meaning, who walks alone if they must. The overman doesn't fear the uncertainty of freedom. They embrace it. They understand that truth isn't found in inherited beliefs or consensus reality, but in self-overcoming, in striving, in becoming. But here's the twist. Becoming the overman is rare. Most people, Nietzsche thought, would rather stay in the cave. They would rather follow the crowd, live within comfortable lies, and mock those who dare to break free. And so we return to Dunning and Kruger, not as isolated psychologists, but as echoes of Plato, Sartre, and Nietzsche. The illusion of knowledge, the fear of truth, the courage to look inward and say, "I do not know, but I will learn." That is the real journey. So, what do we do with all this? We live in an age of endless opinions. Social media, algorithms, influencers. We're surrounded by shadows, confident voices, and shallow certainty. But maybe the first step is not to speak louder, but to listen more carefully. To ask, like Socrates did, "What do I really know?" To look around and ask, am I still in the cave? And if so, am I willing to leave it? Knowledge isn't just about facts, it's about humility. Philosophy isn't just about abstract thought, it's about how we live. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, maybe you've already taken the first step. Not to be certain, but to be curious. At this point, you might be wondering, what does all this really mean for the everyday person? The philosopher, the thinker, the one who strives to see beyond the cave. They may find comfort in the challenge. But for most of us, the process of questioning and seeking truth isn't always a deliberate philosophical endeavor. It's more often something that happens in moments, moments of doubt, moments of discomfort. But isn't that the struggle? To wrestle with what we don't know, to push against the boundaries of our limited understanding. It's easy to stay in the comfort of the shadows. In fact, it's human nature to seek certainty, to cling to what we think we know. It gives us control, stability. But true knowledge, real understanding, often lies just outside that comfort zone. To step out of the cave is to confront something greater than ignorance. It's to confront the vast unknown, and not just in the world around us, but in ourselves. The more we know, the more we recognize how much more we have to learn. But here's the profound truth. It is in that very recognition that the possibility of growth lies. Philosophy teaches us that knowledge isn't static. It's dynamic, constantly evolving. If we remain stuck, convinced we know everything, we're locked in a static existence, unable to grow. The truly enlightened mind, then, isn't one that knows everything. It's one that knows how much there is left to discover. And this brings us to a crucial point. The struggle for knowledge is also the struggle for freedom. Freedom from the chains of complacency, freedom from the suffocating certainty of ignorance. Every step outside of the cave, every moment of questioning, is an act of liberation. As we dive deeper into this exploration, it's essential to ask, is there an end to the process of seeking? Can we ever really know everything? Or is the pursuit of knowledge a never-ending journey? Consider this. Plato's Allegory suggests that once the prisoner escapes the cave, they can finally see the world for what it truly is. But the real question is, can anyone ever fully leave the cave? Even after stepping out into the sunlight, one can still only see a limited part of the world. Their view is still partial. There is always something more to learn, something beyond the horizon. Nietzsche, too, acknowledged the limits of human knowledge. His concept of the will to power isn't about conquering everything in the world, but about embracing the complexity of existence and transforming ourselves in the process. For Nietzsche, the pursuit of knowledge was not about absolute certainty, but about creating value, transcending weakness, and becoming who we are meant to be. This constant transformation is what separates the philosopher from the ordinary person. The ordinary person, trapped in the shadows, is content with the illusion of certainty. But the philosopher, the one who is truly free, understands that knowledge is not a destination, but a lifelong journey of becoming. But let's not romanticize the philosopher's path. It's easy to think of the philosopher as someone who is calm, rational, and always searching for truth. But the reality is far messier. To question, to seek, to struggle, it's exhausting, it's uncomfortable. It's filled with moments of doubt, uncertainty, and fear. The more you know, the more you realize that the world is vast and answers aren't always clear. This is where existentialism becomes so relevant. Sartre's notion of existential anguish speaks to the uncomfortable truth that our freedom is a double-edged sword. The more we are aware of the possibilities before us, the more we are confronted by the burden of choice and the weight of responsibility. In fact, it's in those moments of discomfort that true courage emerges. To question everything and still choose to act, to step into the unknown with the recognition that we may never have all the answers. That is where personal transformation happens. It's about embracing the uncertainty rather than fearing it. It's about realizing that freedom is not about knowing everything. It's about being able to live authentically in the face of the unknown. And in this struggle, we return to Nietzsche's idea of becoming the Übermensch. It's not about being perfect. It's about choosing to act in spite of uncertainty. It's about accepting the chaos of existence and finding meaning through struggle, through the overcoming of limitations, both external and internal. Now, let's bring all of this back to the Dunning-Kruger effect. What if the overconfidence we see in people, the illusion of knowledge, is not just a simple cognitive flaw, but a sign of a deeper struggle? Could it be that those who overestimate their knowledge are simply avoiding the terrifying complexity of true understanding? Think about it. If you walk into a situation thinking you know everything, you avoid the deep, uncomfortable work of confronting the unknown. You don't need to struggle with the fact that there's more to learn. You don't need to face the existential anxiety that comes with uncertainty. But true philosophical growth requires us to admit that we don't know it all. The Dunning-Kruger effect, in some ways, is a defense mechanism, our brain's way of protecting us from the overwhelming nature of ignorance. But just as Nietzsche suggests that we must overcome weakness to become stronger, we must also overcome our fear of uncertainty to truly grow in knowledge. The person who is humble enough to admit what they don't know is the one who is ready to grow. And this growth, like Nietzsche's Übermensch, is not about achieving perfection. It's about the courage to face the unknown and to continuously strive to become something more, something greater than our past selves. So, where do we go from here? If knowledge is a journey, then the Dunning-Kruger effect, Plato's cave, existentialism, and Nietzsche's philosophy all point to the same essential truth. The quest for wisdom is a constant, evolving process. We may never fully escape the cave. We may never reach an end point of perfect understanding. But that's not the point. The point is to continue searching, questioning, and challenging ourselves. The point is to embrace the discomfort of uncertainty, to step out of the shadows, and to recognize that the real meaning of life lies not in finding all the answers, but in asking the right questions. Perhaps the greatest lesson we can learn from all these philosophers is that wisdom isn't something we possess. It's something we become. It's an ongoing process, a path that requires courage, humility, and the willingness to face the unknown. And as we walk that path, one question remains. How far are we willing to go, and what truths will we uncover along the way? As we continue on this journey of philosophical growth, we encounter another profound idea, one that has been explored by thinkers across history: the intersection of knowledge and power. Friedrich Nietzsche, with his idea of the will to power, suggested that the pursuit of knowledge is not just about accumulating facts or discovering truths, but about transforming one's will, one's power to act and create. Power, in Nietzsche's philosophy, is not simply about dominance over others. It's about mastery over oneself, the ability to shape one's own destiny. And knowledge is the key to unlocking that power. The more we know, the more we understand not just the world around us, but the forces within us that influence how we act, how we engage with the world, and how we interact with others. This idea is echoed in Plato's cave, where the prisoner who escapes into the light doesn't just gain intellectual knowledge. They gain the ability to see the world clearly, to see it as it truly is. In doing so, they gain a kind of power, the power to shape their actions, their beliefs, and even their society. The truth, in this sense, is not merely an abstract concept, but a tool for creating change. This theme of knowledge as power is central to many aspects of philosophy and is something that we can apply to our own lives. When we expand our understanding, we expand our capacity to act. The person who understands the complexities of human nature